Sounds good.
Hey,
Hello. Yeah. Hey. Hello and
Hi.
welcome on our today code review workshop. Chao was sharing a MR that we had on the week. Chao, would you
Yeah,
share it?
so funny enough, this MR is written by me, reviewed by Paulina. So both persons are here. So this is the MR. Is to disable, replace, and delete files on default branch when user cannot unlock file. There's no change to the functionality, but rather we're disabling the button so we're stopping them a lot earlier in the user flow. Rather, they try to make changes and realize they cannot. So that's the gist of what this happened. Um, After 11 commits, 22 pipelines, and 30 file changes, and this much file changes, we finally made it. So there's two things I think made this MR bigger than it should be. Well, ideal size. One is the fact that we're introducing the checks for default branch from backend. So this root ref need to be drilled in a few level. And second is, as you can see, there's a lot of changes in both the CE version and the EE versions of the file. So lock is the EE functionality, and CE, and then replace and delete is the CE functionality. Prior to this change, what we're doing, I think it's blob
Yeah.
here.
Can you show it
Yes.
in the UI
Oh, in the
to better
UI.
understand what that
Oh,
is?
I would love to, but because I'm trying to test this for a while now. Let me see if my GDK runs.
Do we
I
have
needed to,
on production maybe?
I
yeah.
try, I was just talking about this with Paulina because I try to have a second user so I could be the person who cannot unlock, but it's like really difficult. Hold on.
But we can show it in production and for a person who even has the permissions to
Okay, that I can
delete.
do. So this is actually second chow. Second chow has a uh, project. So essentially, if we pretend this is E, this file is locked, and I have another user comes in who is developer and above who can unlock file typically,
Mhm.
but they cannot unlock this specific file because they're not the author. If they're on master, which is a default branch, then the in the oh, actually the flag is not on.
Oh,
They
it's the
cannot
author of the
replace or
lock,
yeah.
not so only. Oh, okay.
So only the rules to unlock is you have to be developer and plus, project member, and also the author of logs.
Mm.
Or you are the maintainer, which you can just have the maintainer overwrite. Yeah.
Oh,
So, but we can show the also, if you go into the file, these buttons previously were in the header of the file viewer.
Yeah.
So here, and we didn't disable them. So you would end up in the model, try to do it and get stopped. So now
So you
we want to
click
do,
here. Yeah.
yeah, we want to disable it so people know earlier that they cannot
So
do that function.
the idea is that if a file is locked, we should disable the replace and delete buttons. That's the
Only
idea
on
behind the MR.
default branch.
All right.
Mhm. Like once again, this is like already happening. We're just like hoisting when they get stopped much earlier in the flow. So they never go
Mhm.
into this model, make
yeah.
the
Yeah, makes
change,
sense. Mhm.
click, and then to do it. And the other thing, sorry, not show here, I don't have on this user, is there was a flag that we have been changing the one with we introduced like an overflow menu in the blob. It's related to that one specifically. So we move the button here. So now all three buttons are in this overflow menu.
Mm.
And so this is so the reason I show that is this is the blob overflow menu, and this is kind of like where we change the split of things. So if you look here, this is actually the CE versions of it and has the logs and everything. we just never had like a E versions of this file that separated out this thing. So in this MR, I introduced a new file that does basically the extend, but not like using the extend, rather just drop like
Oh,
passing
yes.
on
Yes.
props.
Yeah, this is my favorite way of doing this.
We had to learn it from Sheldon, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't sure. Like we did, I think 1 or 2 attempts to how to split that.
Yeah.
One was we found an example from source code actually, where the computed props were overwritten, but there was nothing in the
Yeah.
template. But at the same time, there was an ES rule introduced
Yeah.
for empty templates, I think. Something
Yeah, so-
failed the
So
pipeline.
when you
yeah.
Yeah, so essentially when you use extend, you extend the CE component.
Yeah.
But then when you do the calculation, these are not in a template, it will fire this.
I
yeah.
see.
So then we
It
went
extends is doing the extends is not my favorite just because it's so, as I'm editing the CE one, it's not obvious to me at all that like, oh, I'm changing this computed thing and that's actually going to be, is being overwritten in EE. When we do the composition, when we have EE compose CE, then as I change CE, I know that it's not getting like sneakily overwritten. That's my reason why I like always using the composition over extending. We've had some
Well, this
really,
one.
really gnarly extending components.
Yeah. So in the docs,
And the docs, does it say to use extends?
I think so, if I remember correctly. Hold on, let me read this part.
There are a couple of approaches, I think.
The one that was recommended was not here. I had a note to like add it here,
Oh yeah.
especially. Oh, so the recommended approach is the named scope slots option, which I use actually in another file because there's 2 E file I had to add. So I use the other one. So you basically add a slot in the CE version,
Mhm.
and then you use a template in the EE version, essentially. We do that for the WebID and code dropdown.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
that
And this,
one,
yeah,
and
this looks
then-
like the composition approach. Yeah.
This one?
No, the one right up there, the one that uses slots. Even if you're not extending the template, you can still do like a composition approach where it's just like through I'm just changing the props pass to the CE thing a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm like, maybe I can add another little paragraph here as an example of what we did here. But okay, hold on.
Yeah.
I'm lost it. Yeah, so introducing this guy, the test with it, all that sort of thing, like caused this to be a lot bigger.
Mm.
Hold on, show the version.
Interesting for me as a reviewer, it was at the stage, like, that review stage where everyone is already tired and there's been so many back and forths and everyone wants this to be merged, but everyone is less and less certain about this being merged.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh man.
So I was even like writing to Chell on this, like, we're gonna measure it, just not today. And then one thing I decided to do, I took 1 day break from reviewing it because we're going back and forth with a comedy a day, I think.
Yeah, it was this
yeah.
guy.
And I took a break, and then 2 days later, I just said, okay, if I get that now, and I start reviewing from scratch, and I went like top to bottom, not the last 2 comments, everything. And it was very, it was a lot of work and it was tiring to get that to the stage. But the moment I read it from the beginning to the end, it was so clear what this thing was doing, even though it was 700 lines change, that I was sure we can merge it right away, and it merged without any problem.
Nice.
And it worked fine. So like it's a good example that sometimes taking a break is a good idea to have a fresh look.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also like when you're in that tired of the MR stage, like I think it's up to the maintainer how to navigate it properly, so both the author and the maintainer and other reviewers are not fed up with it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's yeah, that's a really interesting MR. I think there's a lot of things that can be taken away, try to ruminate over, to think about how we can improve some of our processes and stuff. And even our code organization. And you brought up a really good question, Chow, of like, so it sounds like one significant contributor to the complexity of the MR was that we kind of have a rule that we don't do inline EE checks. And we got to do this
Yeah.
fancy way of extending for EE behavior. So yeah, you brought up this question of, and you had brought up the sentiment that you would really like it if we did like if is EE, we do this, else not in the code. And I think it's a good question. I wonder, what do you think about it?
I have faced similar situations, and I have created an issue to collect more feedback on how we use the CE/EE separation. I'll share it afterwards. Maybe this MR is a good example of this. As far as I understand, the reason we separate the CE from EE is to have a clean CE packages. Like we would just we have a separate repo. We publish code without the EE folder, and I think that this separation is easy to do with the static is EE checks. Like this could be dropped by by static code analysis. So we could just drop the dead branches is EE from these releases. So we don't have to use a simple drop EE folder logic. We could be more sophisticated in this release and just drop the dead code conditions is EE. And I think that historically, maybe the CE/EE separation was easily to do in Ruby on Rails because there the classes are more prevalent, and it's easier to do extends. I think in the front end land with the templates and more maybe nuanced things, it's harder to do, especially with the view component model. I think it's a bit harder to do. And it did in Mars, I saw it did lead to a more complex logic. And I think that the main benefit not the main benefit, but the main thing we should aim for is not an ease of delivering, like not the main ease of packaging stuff, but to ease the maintainership of this. So if we make it simpler in code, but harder to package, I think it's fine. And I think it's solvable if we could statically, and all the modern tools do this, drop the dead end code. And I think it's doable, just, run a webpack on it without minification, anything, just drop the is EE branch and just deliver that. So yeah, that's a general idea and concern I had for a while, and I think this MR also reflects this pain point.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting idea for using the code branches that at compile time you can figure out of like, oh, this is all gonna, kind of the code compile optimizations that native compilers use if they know, oh, this, based on this macro, this isn't going to be even, this is all dead code. We can get that out of the build. That would be really interesting if we had a CE and an EE build on just a single file that, oh, we can strip out those blocks of code that are surrounding those conditions. And we can end up achieving our similar goals. At the same time, is like, I don't know. What can we see having more of those like is EE conditions? Would they actually add to the complexity, but just in a different way, you know?
I think we could, we could just give ourselves an additional tool without dropping the existing ones. I think we still could have some CEE file level separation. Maybe get some better logic on how we separate them. I would love having them in the same folder, by the way, not in a separate branches. But I think that adds to visibility, transparency of the code. But anyway, yeah, I think if we add the inline logic branching, I think we could still have the file level branching. At the same time, we would just have more tools. And in such nuanced situations, I think it could be beneficial to have this IFE in the JS code, or also we could have this in the templates. Just if easy, just have
Yeah.
the EE component.
So
Um,
there's
what
another.
what
Oh, go
One
ahead.
thing to keep in mind, we also have Jihu code branch as well. Just something to keep in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. What were we gonna say, Chow?
I was gonna say, like, to play devil's advocate, I know I was like liking this at first, but then I was like, is this introducing too many ways to do the same thing? That's get even more confusing. Because the pattern now will be extending, like we already have the names slot approach. And
This is how we handle. This is the one tool.
Yeah.
This is how we handle
this
it
is
for
another
all.
thing. And then so like
Yeah.
it's gonna get more confusing because it will be another way of doing it.
Yeah. I
Like
could
for consistency, basically.
I could feel like that. I do like that we kind of just have one way of doing the EE thing, and that means all EE concerns have to live in the EE directory. Like, but sometimes I think that sentiment has caused us to add more complexity to the code and the way we structure things than needed to be. There's another reason for doing the EE split. Because it's not just, oh, I have the enterprise edition. It's that our enterprise edition features usually need to have a license check with it. So all things that live inside of EE usually need to have the license check. And that's where the front end gets interesting, because the front end doesn't own the license checks. Like, we receive abilities from the back end a lot, and so we don't really do any of that. We're not really responsible for doing some of the license checking as much as just the ability checking of like, hey, can I do this thing? That in that regard, maybe I could see how the front end's approach is kind of mirroring the back end's approach, but isn't super maybe relevant, because the front end, like, so let's say that there was like, let's say that there's an EE only feature called, I can thinking of a silly verb. What's a silly verb?
Lock.
What did you say? Did you say milk?
Lock.
Oh, lock. Oh, that is a silly verb. Okay, let's just say that. Come on. Let's say that locking a file is a premium plus feature. And I don't know if that's the case. So
It is.
okay, all right. That's great. Let's use that one then. So
Not so silly, huh?
not so silly now. In the I didn't have to come up with a silly, possibly offensive verb, so I'm glad that we landed one. So if we have and the back end, we do our can lock, and we got to check the conditions, but on top of all of that, we got to check the license, and then we can tell, oh, this user can lock. We pass it down to the front end. At that state, the front end doesn't care if it's EE or CE. I just care can lock, you know? And should all my locking stuff just live in CE, and you just got to check can lock. I think that makes sense. I don't know. I mean, it is going to make the build of CE possibly larger than it needs to be, because we know that you will never have to lock if you're in just CE. But I don't know, the maintainability costs are pretty high that I don't think a lot of people are really caring about the bundle size of CE versus of the front end bundle size of CE versus EE.
What do you think if you had an if else statement inside just to check if it's EE in addition to this property?
I don't, well, I'm saying is like, I think the front end doesn't really care about it. I feel like this is like, I actually think it's possible all of our front end code should probably, like, what if all of, I don't know if our front end code never needs to have like an EE specific thing. We could just care about the abilities. Like, you know what I'm saying?
I think the abilities thing is more, yeah, as you said, is about checking the license, not the EECE version, but checking if the license permits this. This is the
But
thing
that's
I think. Mhm.
that's
Oh.
important. The goal is unlicensed EE should be exactly like CE. And so the risk that we run into with the front end when we do these EE splits is that we deviate from that because this has totally happened where, oh, I just assumed we already did the permission check because we're here in EE, but we didn't actually do it.
Mhm.
No.
Mhm.
And
So
I think go ahead.
Does this mean my suggestion to split it was wrong?
No, I think it's consistent with the docs. I think it's consistent with our current approach. I just think it's worth challenging how the front end currently does it, of being like, wait, does the front end, is this actually beneficial? Like, why are we doing this thing that we've done for years? And the history of it is EE used to live in a separate project. Like that's we're still doing the same thing.
We still release this.
Right. So we still do the same thing that we did back then. And I don't know if that's still relevant.
Like,
So-
here's an example. Like, if I understand, sorry. Did someone say something? Oh, sorry. Here's an example. So this check technically, which is the front end, technically is not needed because this is the
Why
check
not?
for the actual license. No?
With
If it's in CE, then it might not, that's a challenge we have currently. That's a CE code as far as I see. And we're
Yes.
checking here an EE-based license flag. Like we check here if feature is on, and this feature is basically an EE thing. And we have this mix a lot. It's hard to, not to have this, but I think we have this a lot.
I think is that features? Is that a feature flag or a
No, it's a line.
It's actually the log feature. So log is
Oh.
exists on directory and also file level. So, and then because of flags, we have, and that is actually another confusion of mine is when I see GL features, my instant is a feature flag, only to realize when I go try to turn it on, it doesn't exist. I'm like, not a feature flag. That's another thing we don't have. That confuses me.
This drives from the license, right?
Yes.
Mhm. So yeah, we have this thing in a CE code base, which is supposed to be an EE thing because we have only these things there, I assume. And this is kind of mix we have all over the code base. And this No, we try to separate things properly, but we still have this. And I think that this is what Paul means by checking the back end of things. And current way we do is, yeah, we check if the license permits some certain features or actions. My idea with if else thing was to simplify the code base, but still have these releases clean of EE code, like force releases being clean of EE code. And Paul's, I think, takes it further, saying that, hey, maybe we don't need to clean this at all. Do I interpret this right, Paul?
Yeah, I'm just brainstorming. I think it's worth looking at what's the current thing we do and why, and what could we do? Does that meet, our current needs? And yeah, as I think about the front end responsibilities, I don't know if doing the EE split in the front end makes sense. And so even based on this on line 116, there's an abstraction that we're not really good at doing this, and we need to. Part of this is just like needing to see, and everyone contributing to GitLab needing to buy into an architecture, which is so we have this concept of abilities in the back end, which is all the like can checks. And it's a little funny. Like, I don't know if you've ever had to add stuff to the back end of like, your rules and policies and whether certain abilities get enabled or disabled or prevented. And it's a little funny, but it's, as I've interpreted it, that's kind of how we want this to be the primary concept for what can an actor do. So we actually have like push front end ability rather than needing to do push front end license or push front end feature flag. We actually have push front end ability. And as I think about the responsibility of things, it's like, so I dropped the link to it here in the bottom there. If you want to open up that link. So we have push front end ability. And as I think about it, is like we actually probably should not have push front end feature flag, push front end license feature. It should just be the front end just needs to know what can I do? What are my abilities? And the feature flags and license features and all the other things, those turn those things on and off. And then from the sense of abilities, we actually like, in that sense, our front end code gets quite coupled to the ability implementation by putting things into EE. Is like, what's the front end to say that, the only reason this thing can be done is because it's an EE? Like, that's kind of, that concept gets leaks out of that abstraction with the front end's EE CE split. So I guess my main brainstorm hypothesis is that front end doesn't need this. And I'd be curious what that looks like, but maybe it does.
And it's a very interesting thing with the pushabilities. What I want to take one step back. Why do we separate backend code then? Like, why do we have a separate?
Check. Yeah, it's the main thing is the license check, and it's actually under a different license too. So because
can we have a runtime license check on backend as well?
This is a good question, and there's probably a lot more to this, but there's two reasons. One is, and this might be the reason why we do it in the front end too, but it's the license check, and it's actually licensed differently. So like all the CE code, I think, is like MIT licensed, but the EE code is licensed in such a way that you're not allowed to remove the license checks. Does that make sense?
I thought that we are releasing the code under different license. Like the code itself has the first version, different license.
Yes. So yeah, in that sense, is like, maybe maybe that's why front end has to be in a separate EE folder. If we have like, if we want to make sure that these features aren't being exposed and quote unquote stolen by people, and it wouldn't be stolen if it was legal, but like they're not being unlocked in a way that we didn't intend them to be. You know what I mean?
I think it's funny. I've been working on EE license features for like 2 years, and I never fully grasped the idea of this separation. And I think it's, noteworthy that we have hard time defining how it should work, why it should work that way.
Yeah, but I do think I definitely subscribe to the idea that it's worth us revisiting. Is what we do still relevant? Because we're kind of doing the same thing we did when we had a separate project, and a lot of time has passed, and I don't know if the front end and the back end are definitely need to be treated the same in this regard. So I just linked to the license under EE. It's different than our top folder license. So like all the code under EE is like quote unquote open core, where you can see it, but we definitely forbid, the manipulation of the EE code.
Maybe it would be hard with the inline checks to license that.
Well, yeah, we wouldn't be able to do that. And so this is a big deal of why this code lives in a different folder, is for this reason too. But I don't know. I have a feeling that all of our front end ends up being MIT licensed anyways. I have a feeling our front end is treated differently anyway. So I don't know if our front end runs into the same problem. Don't quote me on that. Oh wait, yeah. Oh yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
recorded.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it was,
If you go to it's recorded. If you scroll down to the top
I was
level
gonna-
license. Keep going, or just license. It'll be yeah. All client-side JavaScript, okay, when served directly or after being compiled, is licensed under MIT expat license. Okay, so that's for like, yeah, when we're sending code down the wire, like in a JavaScript way. Okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean the source code. But it's like, okay, that's different than the way the Ruby code is. Does the JavaScript have the same requirements for this maintainability cost that we experience? Like, what if all the front end code was all in, C? That would be interesting. Do you think that would be a maintainability win?
So for this exact example, if I understand correctly, so path lock is the ability to lock files and directory from backend. And what we discovered, not recently, but recently was the GraphQL was returning different permission. So backend actually did a refactor and then exposed different, like more standard, not standard, like close to what we normally do. Like there's a destroy path log, create path log, and read path log. And we're using these two to create an update and then delete. But I was like, when I read this, I was like, what do we need the read for? So is it correct to say in this case, read is technically just that license check coming from backend? Yes and no.
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know. You could choose to, it's like, it's kind of an unnecessary abstraction, it seems like, because it's just, oh, can I read the code? Means that is how it's effectively implemented. So that question of that you ask, I don't think we currently check for this in the front end, but maybe we should. I think it's interesting. It's like, okay, how over the top's not the right word, but it is like, how pedantic do you want to be about it? And sometimes that pays off because it actually we end up adding more rules to what read path log means, So there's a little bit of, I would say there's a little bit of an art to it, like, because you can't just be like, okay, I've got to check for every single action, every single read, I've got to check every kind of thing there. But that can get a little silly.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question. But I think that kind of happens from when, when someone's listing out verbs for a noun, then people just keep going. It's like, oh, we're going to create a lock, destroy a lock. Well, I got to be able to read a lock, patch a lock, put a lock.
Yeah, I think it's like corresponding to the API method. Yeah, like when I read it, I was like, oh yeah, it's like kind of no, but it's interesting because like accidentally we just had this also in the same lock area that the world we're in.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I was gonna mention earlier that grew this specific MR a little bit was the mock data that we used in the test. These were added, copy and pasted from CE to EE because of the import that we use, the ELCE one. I feel like this is something we could maybe have another way. Because when we use this check, we need that object to exist in both files. And that's just pure duplication.
I think you could import that in the EE version and re-export that.
Yeah, EE can
Okay.
EE can import straight from CE. So like if it's the same, if you're not changing anything, you can just import straight from CE.
Okay.
With
That
Hilde.
That reminded me that we have a total mess with IntelliSense on the code. IntelliSense is another feature. Code inference, type inference in the code because of this EELC thing. The if-else statement would make it much more easier. Not having this if-else statement would make it even more simple if we just check the backend feature.
Yeah. You're starting to think it's a good idea, Cos. I can tell.
No, that's where it all started because I was bothered with the typings in these EELCE imports. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. If you can imagine, and I didn't experience this as much as long as many others did, but imagine having EE living in a separate project and making this change that you all made, but you have to open up a separate MR on a separate project just for the EE stuff and the CE stuff. Imagine all those pipeline magic that we set up to like make sure that the MR's pipelines were like considering each other, and you had to have the titles match each other. It was wild. I was, and they digress from each other. So like EE's CE and like some of the base code like actually conflicted with CE. Like, so like it took a long time for us to resolve all of the differences between EE and CE, and then we moved to one project. And that I was blown away. I was like, this was a huge effort. If GitLab can do this, we can do anything.
Like migrate Vue to free.
Well, that's what I would think.
What about jQuery? What about jQuery? Can we get rid of that?
Well, I love jQuery.
That's impossible. Yeah. Everybody here loves it. So yeah.
Everybody here loves it too much. I know. jQuery is, how can we get rid of jQuery? Yeah. Anyways, Yeah,
But-
this
but-
is fine.
Back to the CEE thing. Maybe we are paying the price of maintainability for a simple license definitions. Maybe we could consult how we could make the license definition more complex. Maybe we could add in the license that code under if
Yeah.
EE branches is under EE license. Maybe something like that could simplify our lives in maintainability of the code.
And yeah, and I think it's worth talking about. And I think it's worth talking about from how front end is different than back end, like keeping that as a part of the conversation.
Oh, yeah, I would love to
But
have just
we
drop
we
that
we
open.
often will we will often move code from EE to CE. Like we'll often, oh, we had this under a license and like, oh, this is now going to be free tier thing. Like, and my time at GitLab, I don't know if we do that as much anymore, but we did that quite a bit. But the effect of having things split up, like that sticks around in the code for a while. And then now I had to do this whole thing to like move it down, that if in the front end it was just these ability checks, I wouldn't have to ever update anything.
Just
I think
Interesting. Yeah.
I think there's some wins if we do just challenge what we're considering to be unmovable norm. I think there might be some interesting wins there. But yeah, definitely migrate to Vue 3 first. That's
Chicken
actually
the jQuery.
actually should be the split. We actually should change front ends split from CE and EE to Vue 2 and Vue
Vue
No.
3.
3 and Vue 2.
This we
Let's
still
make-
have we still have Vue shared folder
I
that
know.
is supposed to serve for new Vue approach, I think, because we have this like shared file. I think we have shared folder that was for the old jQuery times. We now have the Vue shared folder for the new shiny Vue applications. We probably could have new Vue and maybe code split it.
I'm gonna show off
Wow.
my wife made me this delicious looking breakfast.
Oh.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness. I know. You all are gonna need to leave now. This is this is about to get messy. No. Anyways, yeah, that was a fun conversation. Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. Thanks for bringing up that MR. That's a really interesting MR because it's like just highlights the cost that we pay, and we got to ask ourselves, wait, should we still be subscribing to this? Because there's a cost there. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun.
Are we doing pairing today?
We are.